Greetings, my name is Pete Ring. My background is in military aviation and in particular fighters and choppers. I do these chats on behalf of Air Force Association New South Wales and on behalf of Wings magazine and also for our Wings Australia YouTube channel. Could I also ask that if you like our videos, then please subscribe to our channel and have a look at the description on our channel for this video, and you'll find links to subscribing to our magazine called Wings and subscribing to Air Force Association New South Wales. How many missions did you fly?
I flew 35.
And I believe that the average survival of bomber crews was not very high, and so to fly 35.
I've heard two versions. One was the life of an air crew was 5 trips, and the other one I heard was 7 trips. So it was something like that. So if you got over 10, you were doing bloody well.
And did you fly once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week?
Oh, it varied. It was you very rarely flew one night following the other. We did, in fact, do that with our first and second trips were done on the same alternate nights, but that was too demanding on the crew.
Yeah.
But mostly, I would say you do about 2 trips a week.
Aye. And
sometimes you'd go for a whole week where all the aircraft were grounded because of bad weather,
right.
either in where you are, or in Germany, and particularly in France, for instance, there were a lot of targets we had to bomb in France, but because the French people were our friends, we had to be very sure that their civilian losses were minimized. And we had a rule that if you couldn't see the target, you wouldn't bomb it. You had to see the target.
Yeah.
Which was a very good thing.
Yeah.
And the French appreciated it. In fact, they gave me a Legion of Honor. Would you believe?
Yes, I'm sure you all deserved that.
Well, I don't know why they gave it to me, but they did, but only because I'd done so many trips to France.
Yeah.
You know.
So how did you feel about moonlight nights? Lights that were moonlight?
Well, it was called the Bomber's Moon, and you may see a few other aircraft those nights, but not often. But the German night fighters loved the moon because they could pick out our aircraft a little bit easier, not too easy, but still there we are. So a bomber's moon, you had to be very much alert. And of course, the big problem we had is that when we were going on long distance trips, which were probably 8 hours long, the problem was to stay awake, because for an air gunner, what's he going to do? All he does is looks out into the dark, looking for fighters, and you get a bit fed up with that. And I think a lot of people fell asleep. I didn't. I was too frightened.
So when the flak was coming up, did you see much of that from your mid-upper gun turret?
Well, of course, with the shells going off, you didn't see the shell coming up. All you knew was there was an explosion. I don't know, I would say if an anti-aircraft shell went off within, say, 200 or 300 yards of where you were, you could be in trouble.
Wow,
we often got back. Well, almost most nights when we got back home to England, we would have holes in our aircraft that we didn't know about. Just from the flak itself.
Wow.
And
That's
the
yeah.
rear gunner, my mid upper gunner, because of the machinery that was all around us, we were somehow protected. But there we are. My greatest fear was frostbite, and that's a very painful thing to get. But it saved my life, because after the Augsburg flight, which we actually crashed, you know about that though, don't you? When we had to belly land because we'd been hit with anti-aircraft fire,
Yeah.
and we lost. Pardon me. We lost all the use of all the hydraulics, so we had no wheels. At the time we were hit, our bomb doors were open, and they stayed open. We had no flaps, and we then, at the same time, another bomber above us dropped his bomb and hit our wingtip and knocked 6 feet off it.
All at the same time.
All at the same time. So,
Wow.
I mean, how we ever got back from that, I still don't know. And our pilot was only 20 years old, would you
Wow.
believe?
Wow.
20 years old.
A lot of responsibility. Did you, when you crashed, to you sitting in the aircraft, how did the crash feel? Like as you hit the ground, did the aircraft disintegrate? Did you slide to a halt? What did it feel like?
Oh, well, we were very fortunate that, when I say fortunate, our ground staff wouldn't allow us to land on the runway because of damaging the runway when there was other aircraft coming. So we had to land on the side, which proved to be the best thing ever, because the grass on the side of the thing was full of slushy, wet. It was a typical winter's day, and it was very wet. So as soon as our bomb doors, which were the first thing to hit, they were going into watery grass, not into concrete. And the first thing that happened when they hit the ground was we still had some incendiary bombs on board that we couldn't release. And we were frightened as soon as we hit the ground, they would catch, and they did catch fire. But by the time we hit the ground, they dropped off. And by the time they were 10 or 15 feet away from us, they caught fire, but it didn't matter then. So by the time we came to a halt, which would have been, half a mile, I suppose, we pulled up finally just before the end of a runway or a perimeter track. So we were very, very lucky.
Did the tail gunner stay in the tail gun position for a crash landing, or did he come forward?
No, we both of us got out of our turrets, and we went and sat back against the bomb doors.
Good.
Yes. But
So did it feel like? Did it feel like a? Did it feel to you like it was imminent death? Did you
oh
feel
yes,
like?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't think we'd make it, to be honest.
Wow. Wow.
And we were sent off on what they call survivor's leave. We were given 7 days off. And when we came back, of course, I was still in trouble with the frostbite, and I was grounded for a couple of weeks, during which time my crew went off with another man in my place, and they all died.
Wow.
They crashed in somewhere in Cambridge. Terrible.
That must have been tough.
And the very day that they were killed, the pilot, as I said, was only a sergeant. His pilot's commission came through, but he never knew it. And he was awarded an immediate DFM for his performance. I'll never forget thanking him. And 20 years old, can you imagine?
Mm. Mm. Very dramatic. So let's go on to something a little bit lighter then. What was the bombing accuracy like at the beginning? How accurate was your bombing? And I believe you may have got a new gun sight, a new bomb sight
Yes,
sometime.
yes. We had a going back to the first. I think I'm only reading history here. The accuracy of the bombing was appalling. They reckoned it if 10% of the aircraft popped their bombs within 5 miles of a target, they were doing all right.
Wow.
Unbelievable that figure. And when I first read that, I wondered why would they ever have bothered to go bombing if that was so inaccurate? But they had no equipment. You see, everything was visual. But when you started to get equipment like a thing called H2S, which is a equipment to a radar control thing, the navigator was able to identify things like railway lines and factories and things like that on his fan. So your accuracy went right up.
Wow.
And then when the Pathfinders came in, of course, then even better.
So yeah, that's true. But did you said the bomb sight improved with some sort of radar, so the navigator could see railway lines and roads, or could they see big buildings as well, big industrial buildings?
I don't think so. No, I don't know because I never saw it. You see, I was in the turret. But
So you believe that your bombing accuracy then improved quite a bit?
yes, and when I went back for my second tour, I went to a squadron which had just been equipped with the latest accuracy equipment. It was called GH, I think it was. And in that particular instance, um, the equipment on board your aircraft was also tied into a ground station, and the ground station and the aircraft did the releasing of the bombs. And we were able to drop bombs within half a mile of our own troops going through to Berlin.
Wow.
That's how accurate you could get.
And the ground station was releasing
The
your
ground
bombs.
staff and the aircraft had equipment which they joined together somehow. And I was told that the actual pressing of the button was done from the ground, but I don't know whether that's true. And by then we were flying in formation, and it was daylight because by then there were no more German fighters around. They'd all run out of gear, run out of petrol, so we were able to go in daylight. The only danger we had then was anti-aircraft fire, and that was very accurate. We very nearly copped it on our last trip. But the bombing accuracy was wonderful compared to two years before.
So I would guess that your crew was very important to you to keep your morale high.
Oh yes, yes. Well, we were young. We were still only teenagers when you think about it, and the world is your oyster when you're a teenager. And when I reread now my old logbook, I'm amazed how patient we were.
How tenacious. Oh man, that's really quite
Yeah,
astounding how people could
yeah,
go back like you did 35 missions.
yes. I think that your having a happy crew was everything,
Yeah.
and we all got on pretty well together. That was the main thing. And I think probably the most important thing of all is to have a pilot who kept his head.
Yeah.
If you had that, you were you were pretty lucky. Well, I never came across a bad pilot, funnily enough. I suppose there would have been some, but the bad ones would have been weeded out during training.
Yes.
And I never flew with a bad pilot.
That's great.
And yet they reckon Guy Gibson, probably the most famous pilot of all, they reckon he was a lousy pilot from an aircrew point of view. He didn't take any notice of anybody else but himself, and he was very brave, but he didn't follow a pattern.
Wow. So I believe another story, you went to bomb some marshalling yards
Yes.
and you accidentally dropped your bombs and sunk a ship.
That was in Kiel. Kiel.
Yeah.
Uh, we actually went twice to Kiel, and we didn't mind going there because most of the trip was over the North Sea. So we only got exposed to fighters and bomb and aircraft guns over Denmark. It's actually in Denmark, isn't it? Kiel. And it was the headquarters of the German Navy. And one of the battleships, the Admiral von Scheer, was in dock. And our bombing that night was not battleships. It was some factories about a mile away. But one or two bombs went astray, and one went down the funnel of this battleship, right into the very spot that it should have, blew it up, and she turned upside down. And of course, you can imagine the British newspapers saying, "Oh, the RAF, they went in and they." The newspapers in England were very kind to us because every raid they reported on was a successful one, even if it wasn't. We took quite a few journalists with us. When I was rereading my logbook recently, and I was surprised how many trips we did where nothing happened.
Yeah.
Yes. One imagines that every time you go out at night, you're battling, but you're not. Sometimes you went and bombed, and you might have seen flak, but it was 5 miles away. You know what I'm saying? And you were lucky if you. Yeah. There we are.
Someone described flying in wartime as lots of boredom punctuated by moments of terror.
That would be pretty right. The boredom thing I can confirm. I can confirm.
But there were moments.
If you were just a rear gunner doing this all the time, and
Yeah.
that's all he was doing,
Yeah.
and looking out for bombers, and never seeing anything for hours, and even 4 or 5 trips, you wouldn't see another fighter, and they're going to do that for 8 hours. Gee whiz.
Well, I suppose your motivation is your life might depend on it.
Well, it was fear that kept you awake.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So there's another episode here where I believe you were coned by searchlights.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, the German searchlights were pretty good. And the problem was that if one searchlight picks you up, then all the others come together. If one's successful, he attracts the attention of all the others, and you can't get out of it. Some people might have. We could never get. We had to fly out of ours, and when you were 5 or 10 miles further on, they'd leave you alone. And whilst you were in under searchlight, your aircraft was lit up. It was terrible. The searchlights are terrible things. And one of the things that was significant about going to this, we went to a Polish squadron, and halfway through our flight at 101, we were transferred to we started off a new squadron. Half of them RAF, the other half were Polish airmen who were very experienced pilots, but all of them were fighters, no bomber pilots. So we trained them into the ways of the RAF Bomber Command. And it was a very successful thing. But one of the dangers with the Poles was they got excitable. And their hatred of the Germans was so great, it was alleged, I don't know if it was ever true, that after a bombing raid, they would go down to ground level so that the rear gunners could shoot at the searchlights. Whether it was true, I don't know, but it was that sort of problem we had with them.
Well, one stage I worked with the Polish armed forces in the Middle East, and they are very, very motivated and very, very
excitable,
but very focused, and they're very willing to do the things to get the result.
Yes, yes.
That's a bit like the Australians sometimes. The Australians will do whatever it takes to get a result.
Yes. I had a great admiration for the Poles.
Yes,
most of them, there were quite a lot of Poles in the fighter command during the Battle of Britain.
Yeah.
And they had escaped from Poland, Italy and Gibraltar, and got to England. And there were quite a lot of them. Yeah. And they had a very good reputation.
Yeah, very strong people.
Yes. And so, I remember we also had Polish ladies for our ground staff. And one of the ladies was our favorite. She was lovely, and she made a fuss of us blokes. And her name was Zosha Klimchik.
You still remember it?
Yeah, I still remember her. Oh, she was unforgettable. We don't tell your wives about that.
Did you have a lot of attention from the Salvation Army?
Oh yes, they were wonderful. I couldn't speak highly enough of the Salians, we call them, because almost as soon as you landed after a raid, there would be a mobile canteen come alongside you, and they'd give you a cup of tea and a cigarette. They were absolutely wonderful. I couldn't speak highly enough of the Salvation Army.
I believe on D-Day, your squadron had a number of squadrons had a special role on D-Day. What happened on D-Day?
Oh, well, on D-Day, they were going to have, they did have a big party. Every squadron had a party to celebrate victory in Europe. And that afternoon before the party, we went on a food dropping mission to Holland. And we were told we had to go down as low as possible to not do damage to the food that we were dropping. And what we didn't know until we got back home was that we hit a tree with our bomb door open. And when we got back, we saw this huge rip down our bomb door, and there was a branch of a tree inside. We didn't know, but that's how low we'd gone. And the amusing part was our poor old ground crew couldn't go to the party that night because they had to repair the thing ready for another flight tomorrow. That was the story you were probably talking about.
Well, I bet they weren't very happy with you for
they
stopping.
They wouldn't talk to us.
Oh dear.
But we were very lucky too. We had a very good ground crew. And after about, when you'd first started off, the newest crews were given the oldest planes to fly. And
Yeah.
once you became a bit senior, after
Yeah.
about 4 or 5 flights, you were respected enough to be given a decent aircraft. And once you were given that aircraft, you stayed with it. And it was our aircraft. And
Funny. I think they
yeah,
might still be doing that.
oh yes. Well, you'd have seen it yourself.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
that's human nature.
so did I hear? I do believe you may have dropped some window. The do you know the name window? The little bits
Yeah,
of foil.
the metal strips, yes,
Yeah, yeah. I
yes.
believe you may have spent some time, or you've done a sortie or two dropping that. What was the story around that
Oh
dropping?
well, window was, as it's called, like a bundle of silver strips,
Yeah.
and your bomb aimer would throw out a packet once every 5 minutes. And it was to try and confuse the radar operators. And one particular night, which was the D-Day, the night prior to D-Day starting, we were given a job of flying around Dover and gradually during the night going around in circles, but gradually moving towards France to try and convince the Germans that that's where the invasion was going to take place. And to do it, we had no bombs. We just went around in circles, dropping window to give it the impression that there was a Navy force going across to Calais, I think it was.
Yeah, Calais, yes.
And a few of our aircraft were given a job of going down inside France, about 50 miles in front, dropping all this stuff to try and fool the Germans that this is where the invasion was going to take place. Whereas, of course, they were further down the English coast. And you mightn't believe this, that when we took off to do that job, we were not told that the invasion was starting that night. We went off about 9 or 10 o'clock when it was getting dark, because it was, anyhow. We took off, and by the time we got back home, the BBC was recording that the people were going ashore in France. And that's the first time we knew that the
Oh,
invasion had started. Surprising, isn't it?
yeah, surprising. Did you have any other missions to do on D-Day besides the window one? Did you do anything actually on D-Day?
Yeah, well, yeah, a couple of, not very significant. We had to go and bomb Caen, Caen, which was the big town nearest to the beaches, and we just bombed that to smithereens because the German troops are all parked there. But we did a lot of French trips, but they were always German targets. They weren't French targets. And towards the end, some of them were buzz bomb sites. We had flying bombs.
Yes,
You're familiar with those?
yes.
They were motor driven, and then the motor stopped and down went the bomb. The sites where they were sent from attracted our attention, and we did a lot of bombing of those. And once we'd done a few bombs in the right place, it would bucker up their system.
So
Because
during daylight,
this
when there
was
was
daylight.
when there was no fighters in daylight, what height did you drop your bombs from? Were you down
Um,
forth?
well, normally, I don't know I would think about 9 or 10,000 feet over France. But if there was cloud about, we would go down as low as 2,000 feet
Yeah.
and get underneath it.
Yeah.
Because we weren't allowed to bomb if there was cloud obscuring the target.
Yeah.
Because of our belief with the French,
Yeah.
And I think it was very effective and rather amusing. One night we were going to Boulogne, the French port, and we were going to bomb the port there. And we saw, it wasn't our aircraft, we saw some bombs drop alongside a trawler, which was moored on the pier. And when we came back 5 minutes later, we did another turn back. The trawler was up on the pier. The water had
lifted it.
Funny little things you remember.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please subscribe to our channel. Our channel supports veterans directly and indirectly. We are all volunteers. Additionally, if you go to the description of this particular video, you'll see links to the Australian Military Aviation History Association and links to Air Force Association New South Wales, and you'll see the subscription button to subscribe to our premium aviation magazine.